if they collude to do this kind of interference, they're very much in danger of criminal charges. I'm gonna pause there. That's racketeering, potentially RICO charges. And
Yeah.
so they're on very dangerous ground as this moves forward and more evidence comes out.
This is Bobby Gilstrap. Thank you for joining the SBC Pastors Roundtable today as we discuss a very important case facing Southern Baptists. The Supreme Court has just rejected a case that was petitioned to them by the North American Mission Board against Dr. Will McRaney. Well, our pastors today are going to ask questions of Dr. McRaney. He's our guest today. So first, let's introduce the pastors joining us today. So Jim, why don't you begin for us?
I'm Jim, and I've been at this church for 21 years in Indiana. I started my walk with Christ at Clemson University, got involved with Baptist Student Union. They sent me on a mission trip. I stayed there a year and a half in Colorado, Estes Park. Ended up going to Southern Seminary with my wife, and we served with Billy Graham for about a year, and then we were called to this church. Now to Brian.
Hey, I'm Brian. I pastor Harvest Community Church in Eugene, Oregon. I'm married. I have 2 daughters. I have pastored churches, also been a church planter in Oklahoma, Colorado, and here in Oregon. I've been in my current church here in Eugene about 12 years. So back to you, Bobby.
Thank you, Brian. I'm Bobby Gilstrap, and I've been an SBC pastor and church planter, a NAMB missionary to Michigan, and the executive director for the Baptist State Convention of Michigan. I was led to Atlanta, where I led an associational church planting network, and I'm also the founder of Dynamic Church Ministries, where we help normative-sized church leaders to grow, help churches in transition, and provide church ministry guest consultations. Well, today, we're going to be discussing this topic of this case that was taken to the Supreme Court, but it actually began long before that. And Dr. Will McRaney is going to join us to help us understand kind of what's happening, but really what's going to happen in the future. So, Dr. McRaney, why don't you go ahead and join us? We are glad to have you joining us today.
Bobby, it's good to be with you and be with Jim and be with Brian today.
Well, Will, we want to know a little bit more about you before we kind of dig down into this case and find out what's really going on and how it impacts Southern Baptists. So kind of give us in a nutshell a little bit about who Dr. Will McRaney is.
Certainly, I'd be happy to do that. Currently, I serve as the senior pastor of the Island Chapel. It's basically in St. Pete, Florida, just a little island right off of there. I also serve as the founder and president of the Bullock Institute, where we train and equip leaders. And then prior to this, I've served as a church planter. I served as a pastor. Also, I served on faculty at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary for 11 years, first in the area of evangelism, and then I added in the responsibilities of church planting. And then after those 11 years, I was called to the Florida Baptist Convention, where I served first in evangelism the first 4 years, and the last 2 years in church planting. And then the Baptist Convention of Maryland, Delaware called and asked would I consider becoming their executive director. And so I served the 600 churches, Southern Baptist churches that make up the Maryland, Delaware Baptist Convention.
I want us to start, we need to talk about this case that has just continued to erupt, but many Southern Baptists are not familiar with what's happening in a legal suit that Will has brought against the North American Mission Board. So we want to kind of set that up and dialogue a little bit about that, but we're going to kind of unpack that as we go. But let me throw it to you guys as pastors. We're just kind of sitting around the table today. What kind of questions would you have from the limited knowledge you have about this case that you would want to ask Dr. McRaney personally?
Well, from a bird's eye view, I can see things that disturb me and make me question. But how do we get from where you were to here? I mean, what precipitated the whole beginning of this? I don't have a lot of background on it.
Right. Well, Jim, that's a great question. I'd love to just give a little bit of framework on that. I found myself serving as executive director of the Maryland, Delaware Baptist Convention. And as you know, with the convention, the Southern Baptist Convention had voted to accept a GCR. And really what was the major thrust of that was the North American Mission Board focusing in on church planting. And that been my background. My mentor was Harold Bullock, planted more churches than any church in the history of the SBC. So I was heavily committed to evangelism, heavily committed to church planting, and found myself in an administrative type of leadership role there. And over time, we had a partnership agreement. If people remember back to 2010, the discussion was we're going to eliminate these partnership agreements with state conventions, or we're going to dramatically weaken them. And so there was a new one that existed in 2012 that I inherited, like all the other non-Southern state conventions. And so we had this partnership where we would put in a percentage of income of our resources, and they put a percentage of income, their resources in, and together we'd combine and do some things in the area of church planting, some areas of mission, some areas of evangelism, and included some staff. Well, over time, what happened is that Kevin Ezell thought he had a mandate where he wanted to take more controls of those particular areas, particular area of church planting. And so in doing that, they asked me to.
Well, I was just going to say, just for context, for anybody who's not fully aware, this all happened right after the Great Commission Resurgence was approved by the convention in 2010. And so Dr. Ezell had started leading the North American Mission Board drastically in a different direction than what it had been, with kind of a sole focus on church planting. So you had come in after this was already in process. Just so people kind of understand, the Great Commission Resurgence is kind of, you use the word mandate, and that's probably a fair word, even though the approval of that wasn't a mandate of all Southern Baptists for sure. But that's kind of how it was taken. So sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure we had that context.
Yes, that's good. So they just wanted to have a new agreement and take more and more controls. Well, you know that if you study anything in the area of missions, you understand that the people locally know the mission field the best, and they need to be involved in setting the strategy and the personnel, and they know how to do the mission field. And what the North American Mission Board is really designed to do is to help partner with state conventions, who then help associations and churches. And I know there's been a shift toward this nationalization, almost a federalization, if you would call it that. And so when our convention decided it wasn't going to go this direction with Kevin Ezell, we wanted to partner. We had a partnership agreement. They wanted new agreements that gave them hiring privileges, that gave them controls over assessing and training and resourcing the planters. And that's just bad strategy. We can see for the last 10 years, the utter failure of this entire program in its results and in its partnership. And so, Jim, that's kind of really how we got started with this thing. And then when he didn't get what he wanted, then he put lies in writing, made up lies against me, and that's called libel. And then he made threats against our convention to pull $1 million in partnership. They didn't give us money. Pastors need to understand, they did not give the Maryland, Delaware. Actually, over a 5-year period of time, Jim, I would tell you that our state convention supported Southern Baptist mission work to the tune of $19 million. And that at the same time, the North American Mission Board partnered back, I believe their calculations is 5.2 million. And so this wasn't a needy convention. There was a partnership because we felt like we were stronger together. And that's what it was like. And so when he didn't get what he wanted, he threatened to withhold $1 million a year from the partnership, that agreement we had, that threatened 8 people's jobs plus $500,000 towards ministry. And when he didn't get that, he made a secret bribe to the president of the convention, Bill Warren, that later was revealed. And then when all that didn't work, he kept doing this behind the scenes. Ultimately, the bribe did work, the secret one, and then I was terminated. And what happened after that? He paid off on the bribe. And the minutes of the Baptist Convention in Maryland, Delaware proved that fact.
The bribe. What was the bribe?
The bribe was, we will restore the money. He was going to pull $1 million. The bribe was to restore the money if I was terminated. Actually, he said, I will not be partnering with the Baptist Convention in Maryland, Delaware, as long as Will McRaney remains executive director. That's against the law. That's tortious interference. He had every right. In Southern Baptist pastors, and there's really no such thing as a Southern Baptist pastor, Baptist pastors who cooperate with the Southern Baptist Convention would say, gosh, don't they have a right to control their money? Certainly they do, but they don't have a right to tie it to my termination. That's interference. That's illegal. Mm-hmm. And it's just bad strategy, and it's terrible partnership, and it doesn't reflect anything of Christ.
Well, I just want to make sure I understand. You're employed with the Maryland, Delaware Baptist Convention, not NAMB, right? They're not your employer, but he works to have you fired in this case. How did this move? What was the timeline from this to court? Did you work to resolve things with Ezell? Because I'm sure there are a lot of pastors who would say, Well, hey, there's a biblical model of how we resolve conflict in church world and in the Christian life. And
Yeah,
so
it's
what
a
did you
great
do
question.
with NAMB to try to resolve this along the way? Sort of
Well, that's a great
pre-course.
question, Brian, and it take a long, long time. I'll try to summarize if I can here to give you the answer to that. Well, one, it's just absolutely unconscionable that he would do what he did. But he
Sure.
did that, and ultimately I was terminated after our convention. The pastors need to understand, in February 2015, our pastors, in terms of our general board, voted unanimously to support me in the relationship with NAMB. There was no public conflict. They just supported me. I didn't even know they're going to vote to call a complete support of me, but they did. And they voted unanimously to reject the new strategic partnership agreement with NAMB. So they voted unanimously to support me, unanimously to reject the agreement. And then June 15th, after nothing but positive reviews, I'm terminated. And then the money was restored. And that's where the records, clearly show that. And then it came out. So what did I do after I was terminated? Well, I thought this was just some misunderstandings. I had no idea what all he had done. But I later learned a lot more. But from then until February of the next year, 2016, so from June of 15 to February 2016, I was trying to get some ministry started. I was trying to figure out what in the world's going on. I've never been in a situation I've been terminated before. And so I wrote a 5-page letter of concern to the North American Mission Board trustees, and I copied a few other people to make sure that it would be addressed. So I copied Frank Page, others in leadership of the executive committee, a few state exec directors. Within 20 hours, Brian, I received a full denial signed by the 3 officers of the North American Mission Board, 2 of which I actually had previous relationships with. And so a full denial, no investigation to the claims. So once they did this, then the next thing they did is they hired attorneys. They got their attorneys to send me letters. I hadn't talked to an attorney, hadn't considered a lawsuit, done nothing except express a letter of concern. Then they had their attorneys 2 different times send me letters telling me to stop talking, and again offering complete denial. So I said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up a ministry. So in 2016, I said I got to provide for my family. I had 3 girls, 2 girls actually during this time period. I got married, and for those who have daughters get married, that's an expensive thing. And but I'm very excited about that. But I need to provide for my family, and so some people wanted me to press Kevin more and call press conferences and do all those kinds of things. We didn't. Brian, in August of 2016, Sandy and I sent Kevin Ezel a plant. We didn't think it's appropriate to send flowers, a plant to his office with a note and just wishing him well and blessing to him and his family. That was in August of 2016. Then in what I find out recently, or soon after that, is I had an engagement in Mississippi to speak at a missions conference in October that was going to help me get started with ministry, start back. I mean, I've written in evangelism and church planting, my textbooks being used around the country. And all of a sudden I'm unemployed and I'm not using my gifts. So I started what's called the Church Strengthening Network. And I find my friend in Mississippi is going to host a conference, and I'm going to be a speaker, and we're going to rally some churches and help me get launched again. And then all of a sudden that guy goes silent. Come to find out, looks like the North American Mission Board, maybe through a trustee, had their hand in that. Just a few weeks later, Brian, what happened after that is I was scheduled to speak at the Florida Baptist Convention Pastors Conference. And I had the person who's in charge, the president of that, tell me that he got a call from Jimmy Scroggins, one of Kevin Ezel's closest friends, best friends from Family Church down in West Palm Beach, and saying, hey, we need to get McRaney off the program. And he said, Kevin Ezel, wants him off. And so I have a signed letter saying all that. I have some of the audio tape of that as well. And so he tried to get me off the program. And then one final thing is, I was speaking at the actual Florida Baptist Convention Pastors Conference, and I was sitting at lunch with a friend of mine who was executive committee member, and he handed me his phone, Brian, and he reached it across the table and he said, look at this. And it was a picture of me. And I said, well, at least it's a good picture. I said, where was that taken? And he said, you're not gonna believe this. This has been posted at the headquarters of North American Mission Board. So Brian, over time, what I realized, not only he had done what he did in Maryland and Delaware against me, that when I'm trying to provide for my family and to give leadership and start and regain ministry traction and get moving to helping leaders, which I've done my entire life, Kevin is doing things like interfering, and he's posting my picture as if I've done something wrong. And so at that point, we began to press a little bit. And so long story short, I didn't even still have an attorney until another several months. Actually, it was February 2017 that I even got an attorney. And I've been told that what they had done has been illegal, but I thought, who in the world wants to be in a lawsuit against the North American Mission Board? And I have many friends that have worked there. I've contributed. I've helped with their materials. I've done all number of things with the North American Mission Board. And so there are a lot of friends there, but this was dead wrong. And so we pressed them, and ultimately we filed a suit in April 2017. So that's how the case got started. But I tried the entire time. There's respected people in the Southern Baptist Convention, from past presidents, current presidents, state execs, all would say just ad nauseum, I tried everything in the world I could do to get Kevin to meet and those trustees to meet. Nothing, did not budge. And still to today, Brian, it's hard to believe that we got a decision from the United States Supreme Court yesterday, and still to today, Kevin Ezell has not met. And the trustees who he works for have not made him meet. So in light of the trustees failing in their duties to even call him into an account, all the Matthew 5 I did, all the Matthew 18, all the Proverbs 18, 17 about cross-examination, none of that worked. All the relationships across the country, hundreds of emails, calls, none of it worked. It was going to take a lawsuit.
Let me interrupt just a second. And we want to unpack some more, and I know we have some other questions, but I just want to make sure we're really clear about this point. I've heard a lot of people that have been critical, saying he shouldn't have taken legal action. But what you're saying is the North American Mission Board actually employed lawyers to write you to start with, to basically intimidate, to threaten you as such, and tell you to stop making the accusations you were making, that kind of thing, after you had sent this 5-page letter. Trustees had denied it. I think you said 20 hours.
Yep.
I mean, that couldn't really been investigated. But the reality is they made the first legal step using their lawyers toward you. Do you know if, and then I'll be quiet, guys, let you guys chime in again too, but I just want to ask, do you know if in that 20-hour time period when the trustees said that they, I guess, investigated on their own and got back with you and denied it, did they had conversations with Kevin Ezell? Did they talk to him? Did they ask his side of this story? I mean, what did you hear? What do you know? What have you heard spoken about what happened during that time period?
I've heard nothing, which is that's their favorite tactic.
Okay, so they still haven't spoken.
No, we're sorry. No, we'll look into this. No, let's get together. No, let's talk about this. Full flat out denial within 20 hours. And it wasn't the full board at that time. We're talking about the officers.
Right.
But every trustee is responsible. The current trustees need to understand every trustee is responsible.
Right. Yeah.
Actually, what was filed that was the lies to the United States Supreme Court, the trustees might as well put their name to it because it was represented them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a legal filing, and the ERLC came alongside that and made some just horrible statements at that point. But let's don't dig down in that quite yet, or maybe at all. But guys, yeah. What kind of other thoughts or questions do you have at this point of some of what Will has been sharing?
Well, right away when I hear about the picture being posted and the seeking out to destroy you, Will, what comes to mind is Harvest Bible Chapel and James McDonald, how he had been terrorizing his staff when people didn't toe the line and show loyalty to him. He gave them gifts and rings and had them kind of recite pledges of loyalty, or they would be money held back, threatening, buying a deer palace, basically, using funds for his friends, and then being exposed by Mancow out in Chicago. But how long it took the elder board to address some blatantly obvious things. You know, when he was having money, a debt cycle in his church, it was incredible. Shooting people with BB guns, their pictures and effigies, throwing darts at them. I don't know how far this went, but it does disturb me. And also personally knowing somebody who was on staff at Highview and has left Southern Baptist life because of the politics he saw there and the way people are being treated. Just I don't know the facts that you went through, but it does ring like there's certain commonality between Mark Driscoll and James McDonald, and this attitude of power corrupting and just, mandate. I've got to control things to the point of breaking relationships. And it's a very sad and difficult time right now in convention life with this. This is real. It's very, very disturbing.
Yeah, no doubt. Will, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to throw it out to you anyway. Have similar type things, maybe not the exact, but similar type things happen to others that you're aware of?
Well, the answer is yes. And I'm talking to the first person I know that happened to. That's you, Bobby.
Well, yeah, and that's why I say I know the answer. Ezel, actually, when I was recruited to come to Atlanta to lead the Urban Atlanta Church Planting Network, ultimately became the Plant Atlanta Network. He called the lead person, Larry Cheek, who is the director of missions there in Stone Mountain Association, and he basically told him, "You don't want to do that," and that was in conflict with all of the other references they were getting. And so they did eventually hire me because that one call where he basically said, you don't need to hire him. He was trying to prevent me from finding employment, just like he did with Will, finding something to provide for my family. And I have evidence from a couple of other people that had worked at NAMB during that time that there were some other cases that actually happened as well, even in my situation where I was up for a particular position and then was kind of pushed off because of some unsavory influence.
So let me interrupt you. Let me do it in reverse, Bobby.
Absolutely.
I have a witness that will testify that he was at multiple meetings when you was a state executive director in Michigan, that you were targeted and they were plotting on how to get you removed. Now, guys, let's just push all that aside and deal with what just Bobby said about the associational job. I'm telling you, if it was my employee, I would fire him on the spot. Kevin Ezel picked up a NAMB paying for phone while he's drawing a NAMB salary and not minding his own business, but got into the business of association and called to keep another man from getting employment. I wouldn't give him a second chance on that one fact alone. That man, we have it in writing. We know what he did, and we know what he did to Bobby in Michigan as well. I just got emails yesterday of him strong-arming the Minnesota, Wisconsin, and I published that. I believe it was yesterday that I got that. We know about Alaska. I had a guy, Brent Williams, because Kevin already knows, but he was hired, in the process of being hired, even with the interviews with NAMB, to actually undermine the Alaska executive director, Mike Proctor, at the time. The guy felt so bad about it, he had to pull himself out of Alaska and come back to the continental U.S. and re-engage in ministry because he had got in deep with Kevin. I mean, this has gone on. You could take what's been done in West Virginia or Penn, South Jersey. It's the same pattern. And Jim, you mentioned it at Highview. They actually hired a guy. They knew on the beginning this guy would dismantle the North American Mission Board and dismantle these partnerships. He had proven he would do it at Highview, and he was treacherous then, and nothing has changed.
Yeah, and Will, the further testimony of that is you'd mentioned Jimmy Scroggins a while ago down there in Florida, and Scroggins hosts a church podcast, I guess, and he has friends and others that come on there and he talks to and interviews. Well, he had Kevin on as a guest some time back, and one of the quotes that just really stood out to me from that conversation was when Ezel just said, well, he had to come in and just blow up NAMB. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what it appears. And Johnny Hannigan, I know Johnny Hannigan has been a noted reporter among Southern Baptists for 40 years. Right. And she had told us not long ago that one of the things that she had discovered and she had found out was all of the abuse, all of the pattern of so many things that had been going on all across the United States by Ezel and other, I guess what some have called elitists within Southern Baptist leadership. So now let's move forward a little bit. That gets you to actually filing this legal suit. Okay. Right. Guys, what kind of questions do you have about what's happened now? He's filed legal. Tell us how long ago that was now, Will.
We filed in April 2017.
Okay.
And
so now,
at the same time we filed, we had letters going to their attorneys saying, we'll meet, we'll resolve this. NAMB had made the claims that summer, made in Baptist Press. Often, many of their articles are actually written by NAMB personnel. If you don't know that, that's the way it is. Claiming that I had refused to meet. That's a false, flat out, total, provable lie. But it's just their pattern. So we told them we would meet. We kept saying we'd meet, and we haven't stopped saying it for 4 years.
Most everything he is saying, I've seen the documents on, as have some others. So, and let me just pause real quick to say, we will put in the video description with this. We're going to put the description down there, Will, for your website, link to any kind of documents that we need to see that would be helpful for people to validate this. We'll put down there maybe some of the articles that have been written by others about the Supreme Court filing and the Mississippi District Court filing, some of those kind of things. So we'll compile some of those, and you can check down in the video description for that. All right, let me throw it back over to Brian and Jim. What follow-up questions do you have about now? Let's step into the legal case that's been filed.
I'm just curious. This certainly sounds, right, this is far more than a personal squabble or a disagreement between you and Kevin, right? You have a pattern of abuse, a pattern of abuse of authority, a pattern of abuse of finances, right? Last I heard, the spirit of the cooperative program was cooperation.
Right.
So not only does it not sound cooperative, but it's illegal for one company to interfere in the hiring practices of another company.
Right.
So how did you then get to the Supreme Court? Because, in a sense, it seems like it's a good thing the court basically is sending the case back to the lower courts. But how did it get to the Supreme Court? What was the point of NAMB's filing, right, and is it good that it goes back to the lower courts?
Okay. Well, a lot of things to unpack there, Brian. That's a good thing. I want to say this is very serious, because I believe that we can bring forth evidence. We've talked about the number of cases. We talked about Joni, Highview, but particularly we talked about NAMB in the state conventions. If they collude to do this kind of interference, they're very much in danger of criminal charges. I'm gonna pause there. That's racketeering, potentially RICO charges. And so they're on very dangerous ground as this moves forward and more evidence comes out. It won't be my investigation, because I'll take federal prosecutors. But when you collude, and I have witnesses that will come forward and tell of being in meetings where guys were targeted, that's criminal. So let's just put a pause, put that to the side, and go back to your question. So I'll file the case. Ultimately, the case ended up in the federal. We filed in the state court in Mississippi because of the interference there. Then they moved it to the federal courts. It moved to the federal court. NAMB gave a series of defenses. Their defenses included things that are false, like NAMB is a supporting organization of a state convention, the Baptist Convention of Maryland, Delaware. In other words, we got a release. When you gave a BCMD a release, we got a release because we're a supporting organization. That's just absolutely false. They meet none of the three legal criteria for that.
Now,
Everybody knows.
You're talking about to the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court at this point, right?
Well, no, I'm still with the district court. District court, they made several defenses. Their defense was, we're a supporting organization, we can do this. Or we have absolute privileges over state conventions. We know that's forbidden in the SBC Constitution. Right. They claimed rights and privileges. They said they didn't defame me, but they had every right to defame me. Remember, I didn't work for the North American Mission Board. I wasn't funded by the North American Mission Board. I didn't work for the SBC. And they also claimed they had the same right to interfere. They claimed that they had the right to make the threats and the bribes and payoffs that they did. They said, we didn't do it, but we had the right to do it. And so what they're really doing, Brian, they're really threatening the autonomy of the Baptist bodies. Again, there's no such thing as a Southern Baptist church. These are Baptist churches that choose to partner with the Southern Baptist Convention in terms of supporting it. And actually, the national level was created last. Most people out there listening, they don't understand this. It was local churches that formed associations. It was local churches that then formed state conventions. It was local churches then formed a national convention
Right.
to actually help
Right.
the state conventions, and that's how it was formed. My convention
Right.
that where I served in Baltimore, in Maryland, Delaware, was formed in 1836. That's 9 years before the SBC was formed. That's 160 something years before NAMB was formed. And the idea that we were a supported organization, that they have controls over us in same boards and all that, it's utterly ridiculous. So they started lying at the district court level. Then they tried to use this ministerial stuff, and all this stuff that they use, and First Amendments and all that stuff. So then ultimately, they misled the court. I won't chase the details, but they misled the court in an affidavit by their CFO. They had the BCMD, the CFO, to also mislead the court in terms of financial arrangements and the partnership, but that's provably false. But in the end, the judge just all of a sudden throws the case out. So we appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans. And so we appealed there. We won a 3-0 decision. We submitted briefs. They submitted briefs. We had oral arguments. They were basically claiming employer rights as if we were a denomination, and employer rights over a Baptist partner, a fully autonomous Baptist partnership or group, which is false. And so 3-0 we won. Then they appealed it. They called for an en banc, and which is all the justices in the Fifth Circuit, and we won that decision 9-8. But I'll point out again, Russell Moore, who was Kevin Ezel's one of his church members. In Highview. Russell Moore told the Fifth Circuit in advance of their decision that the SBC was a hierarchy, that the national was over the states and all the way down through, and said there was an umbrella organization. Absolutely, completely, totally false. Any excuse Russell wants to give is completely unacceptable. Should have been fired on the spot. Again, trying to deceive federal courts. You got NAMB doing this. They started the lies at the district level. Then you've got ERLC lying at the Fifth Circuit, and NAMB participating in that, in the relationships. And so they lost there. And then ultimately we ended up at the Supreme Court. I mean, it's crazy because NAMB says, no, we're going to appeal the Fifth Circuit. Look, guys, this is not complicated. Let's deal pastor to pastor. If he hadn't done the things he did, they'd just fight me in the district court. They've got the 7th largest law firm in the United States right now. That one, plus they hired the number 1 firm in DC in terms of helps conservatives, and they still lost in the Supreme Court. They blamed liberal justices. That's what they told the trustees. That's what the trustees are saying after the Fifth Circuit defeated them, in spite of Russell Moore's lies. It was the liberal justices. That's one of the most conservative courts in the country. And then now you have 6 Catholics, I think, on the Supreme Court, the most conservative justices, and we're thankful for them. But they tried to deceive the courts. That's inexcusable. When Kevin Ezel and the trust.
Let me interrupt just a second. And go back to the deceiving the court, but just a huge piece that I think we need to just stop and clarify real quick. You are having to defend yourself, and you're having to find funds, right? To cover legal expenses, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if you guys have dealt with any lawyers lately, but they're not cheap. But the best we know, cooperative program dollars are paying for the lawyers that are being employed. Now, NAMB has lawyers on their staff, but what Will just said is really striking to me. And that is that they have employed these other really big, high-power legal firms, probably top-dollar legal firms, at additional cost to try to literally deceive the court. Most any Southern Baptists, when they hear some of the basic things that Will has just said and other things you've not said at this point that they have said to try to deceive this court, an average Southern Baptist who's been in a Southern Baptist church very long is going to say, that's not Southern Baptist polity. That's not correct. So I just think that's real important to realize that our mission dollars have been going to invest that. And that's something maybe we need to unpack here in a minute. But Will, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to point out that that he and Sandy, they just wanted reconciliation. I mean, he said that repeatedly. He said it today. And they can't get anything except for in the legal system out of NAMB. So we'll pick back up there and let's talk about how that's moving forward now.
Jim, did you have something you were going to?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's very disconcerting, and it doesn't sound like they've already lost twice. So the appeals means they've lost, right?
Yeah,
They lost,
3 times.
and they kept on trying, and now it's kicked back to the court they lost at. So they have already been in a judicial examined 3 times now, and they've failed to prove any credible case to stop a lawsuit from going forward. And then on top of the other fact too, like where you talk about how they made the argument, that's just a lawyer way of hedging their bets. But it's not, again, the thing about the pictures, throwing darts at them from James McDonald, from those guys at Mars Hill, just that type of mentality, it makes me sick if it's true. And it sounds like there's enough people that have seen it that are going to give testimony for that. That's just very unbiblical and ungodly. And again, we all have tempers, we all can blow it, but it's a pattern, like you said, that is just not healthy in general. And it's a pattern that concerns me. And also when they say, well, we didn't do it, but we could have done it. Sounds like a book I heard about. I didn't do it in the trial of the century, but if I had done it, here's how I would have done it, right? That's crazy. And then when you hear about Jimmy Scroggins only going with $1 million behind the backs of the trustees to give to Rayner, all these buddy guys that always have these very questionable ways of dealing with money and people. God bless him. I thought Jim was a friend. I view him as a good guy overall. He's doing great work in Florida. But even one of my good friends who is a CEO of another company, he knows Jimmy and said that I love what he does at his church, but man, that is very disconcerting. I thought better of him. And again, he was under Ezell, and then have Ed Litton right now getting ripped up and down for quoting another pastor, right? Well, what about Kevin Ezell? When I was at Southern, we had Dr. Rogers come in one week. Well, Ezell preached a week before. He preached about Uzzah and David, right? Preached it, great message, wonderful, right? Next week, Dr. Rogers comes in. I'm going to preach an old sermon of mine. Preached it word for word. Ezell was there and shrunk in the front pews because it was just a week ago he'd done that. Not a word about that besides him apologizing to it, but he preached it word for word. And he said, I just pulled it off the top of my desk. It was a busy week. And so he preached at Southern Seminary. God bless him. Dr. Rogers said, hey, you want to shoot my bullets? Go ahead, shoot my bullets. But man, here's a guy that has all these people, riled up against Ed Litton. And Ezell does the same thing. Again, it's good for the goose, good for the gander. Either man up, take responsibility, explain yourself, because I want to know. I'm very concerned overall. What's going on?
It's very bad. I won't chase this very detailed, but I posted on it a while ago in response. But Kevin Ezell, while he was at Highview, had a principal that was later convicted of molesting 7 boys.
I remember that.
11 felonies. And the story he keeps telling, the one that's told, and I have it in writing, it doesn't match reality. And the problem is, on top of that, when Joni Hannigan, who's a sexual abuse survivor that Bobby mentioned a while ago, wrote a story in response to the SBC, remember the Southern Baptist Convention, a resolution on sexual abuse? Remember that? Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just 2018 maybe or something, I believe. Well, Kevin Ezell had his PR person, Mike Ebert, threatened Joni in writing with libel for writing 5 sentences in a 3,000-word article, and what she wrote was absolutely 100% perfectly true and accurate by all accounts. But he's been in cover up and lie and deception for a long time, and that one still has yet to come forward. But how do you threaten a journalist who just came out 2 weeks prior to that with her story on being sexually abused by a deacon, and then threaten her with libel as a journalist?
What did she write?
She wrote on the resolution, and she wrote 5 sentences from that guy's name, Bill Maggard, that was a Highview member that when Kevin got there, I mean, I can chase it for 45 minutes or an hour. I've even talked to the legal people, but the point is Kevin chose to take clergy penitent privilege. And so what Joni was writing on, do we want our pastors taking clergy penitent privilege when things come to them? And actually, if information comes to you that doesn't come from the perpetrator, that none of that's privileged, which is how that information came to Kevin, or his writings indicate that. So that's not even been scratched. And
so then he used lawyers to silence
Yeah,
her,
and
much like he's done with you.
Well, he used a reporter. He used the weight of the North American Mission Board. I have a copy of the text. I had it that night. Within 3 hours of her article being published, she was threatened with libel from the North American Mission Board, a $425 million organization threatening Joni Hennigan, a abuse survivor herself, as Bobby said, a respected longtime journalist in SBC, and threatened her with libel. It silenced her for 7 months, and nobody's. Listen, guys, you're not going to believe it. I'll just tell you, just one more sentence here. I wrote over 300 people connected to Southern Baptist Convention. Listen, over 150 journalists I wrote and gave them the evidence and told them the story. Over 150. I've counted them one by one. Only Will Hall at the Louisiana Baptist Message wrote a paragraph, or maybe it was 2 paragraphs, about her being threatened by Kevin Ezell.
Yeah, and actually,
there's a problem.
Yeah, Joni came out and told her story. Will defended her and really went to bat. I don't want to get too distracted on this journey, but we're talking about patterns. No. We're talking about patterns. That's what we're talking about, patterns of behavior. So I interviewed Joni several weeks back, and I'll put a link to both of those interviews where she tells her story for the first time publicly, and we'll put a link to that in the video description. So, Brian, I think you had a comment, or Jim, one of you. I saw one of you moving.
But it sounds like the Julie Roys and James McDonald battle, where his elders finally came out. They admit they had not, done it right. And you had, over at Willow Creek too, where people just gave pass after pass after pass. Again, it wasn't like one indiscretion, like, well, I said something I shouldn't have said, or I could see where that's wrong. It's like very clear patterns of again and again and again of it wasn't just a little bit of smoke. It was just, fire blazing, and there's just no accountability. And that makes evangelicals and Christians look horrible to a lost world. If this is how we treat each other, Jesus said, we'll know we are his disciples by our love for another, and when you're using manipulation and tactics all the time in order to achieve a goal, and what have we achieved? What has, I remember somebody tweeted they had to defend their church. I think Jimmy Scroggins had to defend his church against young people saying, why are we part of Southern Baptist? And he said, I had to brag on our convention being 3,000 missionaries, and I was thinking, man, I remember going, wow, we're 5,000 missionaries strong 10 years ago, and with this lawsuit, I just gotta wonder, why is that the report, the inner workings that came to the GCR, why is that again, tabled for another 5 years? Was it tabled for 10 years at first and now 5 years more?
Well, it's if you're talking about it's been it's sealed for 15 years.
Was it sealed initially for 15?
Yeah, no, it was sealed initially for 10. Yeah, and then Ronnie Floyd came back and announced, well, we've decided to make it 15.
Who decided? You see what I'm saying? I mean, that's the problem I have. And
yeah, it wasn't the convention. The convention didn't vote to do that, I don't believe. Will, isn't that correct?
Task force, that's right.
Yeah, it was the task force that Ronnie was leading.
Here, I've got to wonder what's in that report that might have some impact on what's going on right now with this court case.
Listen, let me interrupt you, Jim. I'm gonna be able to subpoena those records.
Okay.
That's good.
That would make a lot of make it a lot clearer than it is right now.
It doesn't matter what they did and said in their meetings. In reality, what they actually did is illegal, and it continues.
Oh yeah,
it's just wrong. Even if there's nothing there.
Okay, we'll jump us ahead now. The Supreme Court, the Supreme Court has now kicked it out. They reviewed it, right, and looked at it and said, no, we're not going to accept the case. They accepted very few cases. So that means it goes back to the lower court. So update us now. It's going back to the court, the district court, I believe is right, in Mississippi. So I have heard rumor that NAMB already had lined up some additional appeals they think they can make in that court to try to continue to extend it. I just want them, Mike Stone, when I interviewed him a couple of months back, he had a great quote, and he said, it just needs to be litigated so we find out the truth. And I agree. I've heard others say the same thing. I hate that's where it is, but that is where it is, and I'm tired of the lies. So what is anticipated to happen, Will, in that district court in Mississippi?
Yes. Okay. Well, let me put a cap on the SCOTUS if I can.
Okay.
Basically, what the North American Mission Board is trying to do has been trying to get legal federal courts protection to defame and to interfere with any Baptist body, any Baptist church, any Baptist minister. So I have been paying Sandy and I 4 years unemployed, chasing this stuff, defending the Baptist position that's the historical position. It's the Constitution and bylaws position. It is every single legal document that the executive committee's filed in cases of ascending and descending liability. I am defending that position. When I won yesterday, every Southern Baptist won. I paid for it. And what Southern Baptists need to recognize is when they send CP checks to Annie Armstrong, they paid for the North American Mission Board to argue a position that is counter to history, the Constitution, and every other legal filing. And it puts every Southern Baptist minister, church, and entity or Baptist organization at risk. And so that's what they were really asking for. We want the permission to interfere with you, Brian, if they don't like something you do. And Jim, they don't like something about the way you do something. They want the right to defame you. And you know what you would get if they would have won? You would know what your legal recourse would be? Nothing. So why in the world are Southern Baptists not rallying, and why are state conventions not rallying, and Ronnie Floyd and the executive committee not rallying to support my position, which is the SBC position? Myself and the attorney, Sandy and I, won big for the Southern Baptist Convention yesterday, in spite of themselves.
Well, can we just answer that question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Why is you protect the institution? Institutions have a life of their own at times, and people who are at the, suckling at the pig's, breast, they want to stop the cash flow. Let's just be honest. That is, like you said, you've lost income, you don't have the resources, you're not a multimillionaire, you're not getting $1 million check from Lifeway or from NAMB or a payout there. You get nothing, and all these other people that are dependent upon that have to make a choice of, do we let one person suffer for all? Kind of remember that statement in the Bible, and therefore we all do okay, or do we stand up for what's right and at least investigate? I mean, the right thing to do is at least investigate and be open and find the truth. Right. And that's not even something that's even attempted. So that's what's even more concerning.
Kevin Ezell not met once. He will say there's a law case. Well, I'm not sure where the Bible gives you an out when there's a legal case not to meet. I think the Bible has a higher standard, right? And what about the some 16 or 18 months prior to us even having an attorney and filing a lawsuit?
Yeah.
It's a pattern. It's clear. It's clear. What they did to Bobby, what they did to Joni, those are fireable offenses in any other business in the country. What he did in terms of taking clergy penitent privilege, when it actually, the story gets out and they start really investigating, but see, it's going to involve Al Mohler, who was there, and Danny Aiken, who was there, and Jimmy Scroggins, who was there, and Tom Rayner, who was there, and Russell Moore. There you go. So it's more to it. But anyway, so let's see if I can move us forward in terms of the case. So that's what it was at stake. I'm defending, one, I'm exposing wrongs. That's clearly out of Ephesians 5:11. There's nothing right. This is not a case just between Kevin and I. This is not a 1 Corinthians 6 issue. In spite of the claims of that, it's not. You're to expose and confront evil so that actually others learn. And that's actually one of the roles of the court. When they find someone guilty and they have punitive damages, is to prevent others from doing this stuff. So where does it go from now? So
what would be the result? I mean, if you had to go and they just use the power of silence and the power of bullying, how do you get to the truth? And that's the thing people have realized here too. Is same thing with the sex abuse thing. Our convention was not like the Catholic Church where we moved people around and shielded them. We just played, blind and blah, hear no evil, see no evil, and autonomous churches. When there are things that you saw happen out in the Northwest, how they dealt with that, they exposed the evil, they reported it. I have even in my own character, if someone confessed to me that they were abusing a child, I'm going to report them. I don't care whether it's the clergy or not. And on top of that, there's a legal mandate.
It's mandatory reporting.
Yeah, mandatory report. Thank you, Brian. And that just concerns me that we have people protecting institutions first. Again, we don't want to tear institutions down. I love what NAMB has done in the past. I miss the home missionaries. I miss the college missionaries going out every summer. I miss having the U.S. tours. I miss having all those things that used to have that really got people involved. That's why I'm a Southern Baptist, because of the money being put into partnerships with these states and conventions and opportunities for students to get their feet wet in actual on the ground mission work before they got involved in ministry and stuff. And that's just, if it's all just church planning. I also know in my own state that we had North American missionary people funded and our state convention, and the NAMB people said, oh, we just feel like you guys aren't supporting us and blah, 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 blah. And I was just thinking, where did that disconnect happen? Where's it really happen? Are they blaming, they're blaming the convention when the money keeps on getting taken out of the convention? Like, I know for our state, we lost a lot of director of missions because the partnerships broke, right? Everybody's mad at the executives. Everybody's mad at the state office for what NAMB had been doing. And NAMB was like just one step away and not being blamed because the person who's there you get mad at, and that's, I just see that in my eyes. Could I be wrong? Yeah, I'm open to be wrong. I like to be proven wrong. I like to believe the best, but I want to know, man. This is very, very
absolutely. Brian, you had a comment. Yeah,
I was just going to say, let's just be super clear. We can debate among Baptists all day long what the best way to go about using funds and what the best way for church planting is.
Right.
This is not that. We're all for church planting. We're all for doing what it takes to reach people for Jesus. Will's for that. I'm for that. You guys are both for that. Right. What this is about is whether the powers that be can use the powers of the purse and the powers of internal politics, essentially, to control the rest of Southern Baptist life. It's why I think exposing, it's not even exposing, it's just bringing into the light what really matters as it relates to autonomy, what it really matters as it relates to the mission, what it really matters as it relates to how we treat each other. Certainly it's not Christian, it's not God honoring to abuse power. It's not God honoring to run out the clock and say, we just hope this goes away. It's not God honoring to keep it out of the light. Let's just bring it into the light, look at it for what it is, and ask, is this something that honors Jesus and our mission together?
Right.
Yeah, Will, just following up on what Brian said, I mean, I have heard you say before that what he just said would have been satisfactory for a long time for you. Let's just talk about this. Let's bring it in the light. Let's put everything on the table and talk about it. But the North American Mission Board, specifically Kevin Ezell, but those who are working for him, have continued to bury the truth, even though you have evidence. They're not speaking out about it except in these court cases. So, what are your thoughts? And then where are we now coming out of this Supreme Court decision where they've rejected that?
Well, biblically, Bobby, there's several steps that need to take place and should have taken place. People say, Will, what do you want? It's going to take more now, I can tell you that, but because there's been more damages. But the Bible would require these categories: repentance. Haven't gotten close to that yet. And until there's repentance, you can't have reconciliation. These are obvious wrongs. It's not debatable. When you tell the Supreme Court that state conventions or SBC entities, that's a blatant, flat out lie. You're trying to deceive them. So there's got to be repentance. Then there's reconciliation. Then there has to be restitution made. That's straight from the Bible, right? Mm-hmm. And then there should be restoration. I should have been restored. You couldn't move me back in Maryland, Delaware, because the damages and the lies you told there, and people can't separate out the truths from the fiction. Now, the good news is I got all the documents, so I can do it in a court. But until there's repentance, there can't be reconciliation. There's not reconciliation, there's not going to be restitution. Then there's not going to be restoration. All the courts can do, they can't do 1 and 2. Only NAMB trustees can demand that and do it themselves because they too are guilty. But the courts can do restitution. And I'm seeking every penny that is due. And whatever the courts find, if it finds in my favor one day, whatever the courts believe is appropriate penalty to make sure this stuff doesn't happen again. But when you lead a $425 or $35 million organization, and you put your finger on the scales for injustice and for wrong, and you hire massive legal teams all over the country to keep you from having to testify, the trustees should fire Kevin Ezell and fire themselves all in the same meeting. It's just clear. There's no other, it's not even close. This is not like a one-off. This is 50 off or 100 off. And so I'm sorry, I'm so passionate about that, but it's just hard to travel this road of defending Southern Baptists and what matters in our cooperative spirit. And what these guys don't care that started this mess is they don't care about that. When you lose the cooperative spirit, Brian, you said something about that earlier. When you lose the cooperative spirit,
right,
that destroys the cooperative mission. If you don't have a cooperative mission, there's no reason for the cooperative program. So what do you get? You hire personalities and you do massive marketing. It's the reason we have 30 people employed at NAMB working in events and in marketing. And at one point we had a half-time person working in evangelism, and we wonder why we baptized 1 million people less. I mean, listen, guys, my whole life in terms of adult ministry has been engaged in evangelism and church planting. I'm as learned and studied and researched in these areas as anybody. And so I have a passion to honor the gift out there from the widow or widower that gives off Social Security. And what we are doing is it's failing, and it's misusing power and misusing the trust, and it's destroying. And listen, it's going to be like Humpty Dumpty. Sadly, it's going to be Humpty Dumpty. This will not be put together back together.
But
like
Brian, you mentioned the cooperative thing, so I want to, as a pastor here, when I look at this, you break all these cooperative agreements. You claim that NAMB is top down in charge of everybody. They get to pick and fire stuff. I don't know what they're talking, the GCR, which consolidated everything into the power of NAMB. They got the lion's share of the money. I don't know, but this looks like as if they're trying to reshape our denomination from being a Baptist denomination, more of like a Presbyterian denomination or even a Catholic hierarchy. Because I can't imagine what I see that tell us that the direction, the end game, when I try to figure out, well, I see the arrow flying, that they released this arrow, GCR, boom, and where we're headed towards is authoritarian, top down, and we're just watching the behavior that seems to be that kind of megalomaniac mega church pastor mindset. I am the Pope, and it's my way or the highway. And again, you're gonna have to make some decisions, but we could decide to do it as a denomination, but I don't think it's our denomination. But am I off base there, Brian? I mean,
No, I don't think you're off base at all. I think it's what turns all of our stomachs, right? That when you have a heart issue and a heart problem that's as sick as this, if we were to do this in our local church, we'd be fired.
Yeah.
There's just no question about that. My leaders would, long before I got fired, my leaders would sit down with me and say, what's going on? Help us understand, right? That's what the trustees should be doing long before it ever got to this. But I certainly think as a local church pastor, we're not the Southern Baptist Convention never has been a lead from on high kind of thing. But if you think about what the GCR has done and the restructuring of how we operate, Kevin in his position might be the most powerful man in the SBC right now. And he's using that power not for good, but for evil as it relates to this case. Now, again, that doesn't mean that we're not for church planting. We don't support church plants. It doesn't mean we're not for evangelism. NAMB still stands for doing right. I love our church planters. I want to partner with our church planters. But as a local church, we're a bottom-up group of people. We voluntarily associate.
Right.
And what's been put at risk, right, with ascending and descending liability is some sense of the partnership, right? Our ability to continue to partner is at risk if this had gone the other way and SCOTUS had said, we'll hear the case, and it turns out the SBC really is a top-down organization, the legal liabilities there would be just huge.
Churches drop out, churches disassociate.
Oh, totally. And I think we already see some of that happening.
Well, there would be an exodus, and it's just back on
Already
what you said
contacted.
real quick, Brian, the reality is people don't know, but NAMB is actually funding staff positions on the executive committee for Ronnie Floyd. Now, does that have anything to do with what the mission and the focus of the North American Mission Board is supposed to be? I mean, when it was renamed back, for the New Century stressed the whole restructuring of NAM and came from the Home Mission Board. Well, it was North American Missions. I'm sorry, funding staff members on the executive committee doesn't do that. Buying houses, which they've been doing all across the country to put staff members in, and some of them have been church planters, obviously, but in places that weren't even their focus, not even sin cities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The information is just incredible that we're finding out about the kind of corruption. Well, we kind of interrupted and went on a tangent there. Bring us back to where you are. Let's get back to the circuit court or the district court there in Mississippi, so we know where you are, because we want to be able to support you in prayer. I really think, I don't know, Brian, Jim, what is your thought? Do you feel like what is happening now, it's moved to a level that to some extent this case, what Will is doing is he is having to stand up to some extent for what Southern Baptists stand for, and not just what's happened to him. Do you guys concur with that, or is that an overreach?
I totally concur. I think at this point, Will is standing up for the typical normal Southern Baptist church, right? Somebody's got to speak truth to power. I think Will's doing that in this case, and I would stand with him. I'm thankful for him.
Okay, Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm heartbroken. I want to see NAMB succeed. I want to see Kevin and Will get along. I want to see this made right. And it's going to take a lot of work, but man, to push a court case that you get slapped back now 3 times, and how many people have been silenced before this and didn't document, because to be at this level of, to me, it's arrogance to go against the court and pretend you got a case when everybody's going, nope. These are secular people. They're not dumb people. They're very intelligent. They know the law. They understand business. And you got a guy without an MBA, a guy without any business background, a guy without any degree from any. Not that our institutions aren't credible, but they're tier 4. They're not high level. They're not deep research guys. I mean, you don't have to take high level ACT scores to get in somebody. I'm not if you're not talking about that. We have to have these justices are high level, high intelligence, high intellect. These are not dumb people. They're very, very intelligent, and they've all unanimously said, liberal, conservative, it's all goofy. You're wrong. Will's on the right. That's scary when you have that many people saying you're wrong, and you have trustees going, well, he's our guy. We're not going to question it. That's scary. It's blind. The blind leading the blind. That's what's going on. It scares me. It needs to be more. Need to be open to folks. Need to be open to being transparent, open to saying what's going on.
Yeah, and I'll say this: that the reality is, this kind of behavior, I've become aware. I know Will's become aware. Others are becoming aware that this kind of behavior coming from the North American Mission Board has happened to a large number of people. I couldn't put a number on it, but it's been hundreds at least, if not exceeding 1,000 now. But many who are very naive because they're ministers. And they love people, and they want to extend grace, and they want to give those who are in the highest levels of leadership within our denomination the opportunity to say, no, that's no, I must have misunderstood, and they're willing, to accept a lot of things, and then all of a sudden the legs have been cut out from underneath them, and they look back and see what's happened. But they've not documented like Will did. They've not done all that because they've just been, I don't know if it's fair to say naive in the faith. That's not really the right way to say, but they've been naive about all these things and how they function.
Well, they certainly want to believe the best about our convention. And so do I. But there's a difference between believing the best and acknowledging reality.
Yeah.
Our convention is deeply, I don't know, divided, I suppose you could say, right? I mean, I was at the SBC meeting a couple of weeks ago, and good things came out of that in some sense. But look, this is not a right versus left issue. This is a right versus wrong issue. And we have to get it right as a convention, because what hangs in the balance is our ability to cooperate together. And for that matter, for the outside world looking in, what hangs in the balance is the credibility of the gospel.
Right. This is not about procedures and methodology.
No.
As far as how to plant churches. This is a parallel, though, to the problems we have with the way we treated victimizers and victims for the sex scandal.
Totally.
It's very parallel in that we he's a pastor and therefore we can't question him. Oh, well, he's a good guy, he let his brother-in-law get away with it. So I call him Steph anyway because he got a great name and got to put the name on my stage so my church can grow by popularity and by the Christian populist deal. And that's just, we got to get away from trying to copy Hollywood. I mean, that's Hollywood got smacked, and we get we deserve to get smacked too. I mean, I don't want to look at everybody's individual minuscule things, but when it's big issues, we got to just admit it and say we got to get our house cleaned.
100%.
Yeah, I agree. Well, guys, we are circling the airport as such, and we need to start bringing this thing in for a landing in our conversation. So, Will, let me throw it over to you, because we've started in a couple of times to let you try to wrap up the place of where you are now and kind of next steps. And let's give that back to you, because I want you to be able to help us understand where we are now, what is coming, what are your next steps as far as when it gets back to the district court in Mississippi. And then I want to take just a moment for us to be able to talk about how people and maybe strategies for helping support what is going on to try to bring the truth to light as far as this whole situation. So we'll take that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, my attorney that I had in the Supreme Court did a masterful job. If you want to read something from a very brilliant man on who Southern Baptists are, don't read anything that NAMB put down. Read. It's easy to understand what we filed. My attorney filed with the United States Supreme Court, and you can read it and you can understand it.
Is that available where we can link to it? Is that available where we can link?
We'll put a link to that.
Okay, excellent.
We had a man who was not Baptist, not Southern Baptist, but from another faith, understand Southern Baptist and clearly articulate that to the United States Supreme Court, and basically dismantled NAMB's arguments with their own cases. We didn't introduce new cases. We destroyed legally, my attorney did, defended who Baptists are and destroyed them with their own cases. So that's anybody I know that's read them believes that's what happened. So now we're back to the district court. So what we'd like to see happen is that we would get down there and move to what's called the discovery phase, where we would do things like called interrogatory questions. We ask questions they have to give sworn answers to. We'd like to do depositions where we have put people under oath. We would ask them questions, multiple questions. And actually, yes, they do have to testify, or and particularly Kevin Ezell. And if he doesn't testify, it's my understanding, I'm not trying to be a lawyer on this, but it's my understanding he has no choice, unlike in a criminal case. Either he testifies or they lose. So we look forward to deposing Kevin, current NAMB staff members, former NAMB staff members who will tell of the deep workings of NAMB. We will probably as well maybe depose some NAMB trustees and some people from the Baptist Convention of Maryland, Delaware. And so we want to move. We want to be able to subpoena records, like possibly even the GCR records. Of course, they're on the third floor of the building, the executive building in Nashville. They could be down there tinkering with them anytime he gets ready to, but just leave that alone. I don't really care. The point is we're going to be able to have people go under oath, and they're either going to tell the truth regarding things they did and things they know, or they will risk the consequences of perjury. And so we believe that will help us get out the truth. We've tried for over 4 years. I've actually tried over 5 years, almost 5.5 years, to get this resolved. Repentance, reconciliation, restitution, which is still due, and restoration. And that's the way it should work. And there's been a lot of people damaged. And so we hope that the court will do that. What I anticipate is that NAMB will continue to do what they've been doing, because the best predictor of the future is the past. They will continue to try to deny. They will continue to remain silent, so they can't talk. They will continue to use massive amount of legal horsepower to deceive the court and to delay and file every type of motion to delay and to keep from getting discovery to take place. And so will the executive committee of the SBC allow them to do this without defunding them? The executive committee has tools in their quiver. They control the Baptist press. They control the bully pulpit. They control making recommendations of CP allocation. There are things they can do. They have been neutered through GCR and Ronnie Floyd, who's let it happen. But I'm calling for them to be stronger than they are. And so we'll see. We're going back to district court. I don't know. They'll set a calendar and we'll get moving ahead. But I think NAMB's going to do what it's been doing. We're going to try to do what we've been doing. And I'm going to have to get out. I'm going to need some Baptist people to get around me and help me fight for the Baptist way, and to support us financially, and to me to have adequate legal representation when NAMB has the 7th largest law firm in the United States. They have their normal in-house counsel. They have their normal attorneys they use outside Atlanta. And then they have hired Wilmer Hale, which is the largest conservative and most respected conservative firm in all of Washington, D.C. I mean, how many attorneys do they need to defend Kevin from the truth?
It's not just a local magistrate issue. This is like a traffic ticket violation. If you didn't have adequate information in a reasonable case, it could never have gone this far. And if you didn't have the Lord or some righteousness on your side, how could you get this far to where they have to have 15 Goliaths, 7 Goliaths to hit the guy with one lawyer who's coming with the patch on his shoulder arms? How do you? It's obvious that there is a problem here that needs to be resolved. It's not just, oh, he said, she said. The legal counsels have judges of the highest caliber, conservative, have said there is a problem here and this needs to go forward. And you have the convention leaders whistling past the graveyard.
That's right.
This is another thing going to kill our convention if we don't address this properly. And when you have to, as a pastor, I have to worry about Kevin Ezell or anybody in North Michigan Board leadership coming after me. I had somebody make a comment, Jim, and this person is a leader somewhere. You better be careful talking about this stuff, because I'm asking questions, and this person who's in leadership somewhere else says you need to be careful, so I can have them come after me because they don't like what I said and badmouth me and call the convention up and say, hey, one of your top churches that doesn't care, is not towing the line. I want to toe the line if we're on missions. I want to toe the line if we're together. I'll even forgive people. I want to forgive people. Right. But I want to trust and verify now. I want to verify, and I don't see any willingness to be verified.
Well, at this point, we just need to understand, right? If nothing wrong has happened here, then bring it to court, show that nothing wrong has happened here, and let us move forward.
Yes.
If something wrong has happened here, then you need redemption, essentially. But you're ours, right? We need reconciliation. We need restitution. We need restoration.
We didn't get to this point. And Kevin and those trustees being silent and no, there's not problems. I mean, we've documented them all. I tell people, don't take anything I say as face value. You can research it all. I think a pastor stood up at the convention and said he didn't use my name, but he later used it in online, saying I tried to prove this guy wrong and I couldn't. All I have, God has been giving us favor, Jim and Brian and Bobby. God's provided the resources. He's provided the right people. He's given us the right evidence at the right time. He has sustained us. To go unemployed that length of time at 52 years old, $2 weddings, this armies that they have on the other side. It's a God thing of God's provision for us. I want to make sure I'm clear about that. And I'm very, very thankful for an attorney. First, my courageous attorney, solo practice attorney, and my longtime friend, courageous Christian, Harvey Barton in Pascagoula, Mississippi, who took it on. And then God provided through Scott Gant, who made a call, got interested. Most of the time he represents mega corporations in massive deals. And he said, I want to help this guy. And he stepped in, and I am moved. He did masterful work representing Southern Baptists. This is a shame that Southern Baptists can't represent themselves and claim what is true. And so we'll move forward. We'll just be faithful. God will bring justice in the end. I may get it in this lifetime, may not. That's just the way it is in the court system. But God will have his way. And so I would love to have people to pray for us, for Sandy and I. Guys, this, no guy could go through this and his wife wasn't totally lockstep.
Yep.
And so that's just the way it's been, but it's been tough. And we need people to pray for us. And actually we need some people to help us finance defending who we are against people that are insiders that are trying to destroy us. It's just irrefutable when you read one sentence of NAMB's file to the United States Supreme Court in the closing response, which I can't respond to in terms of legally, we can't do anything about it, to say that state conventions, to say I work for a state convention, for an SBC entity, which I didn't say. They say the BCMD is an SBC entity, which it is not. And then they claim to be the SBC mission board, which they're not that either. 3 lies basically in one sentence. And it's not my opinion, it's just fact. So I encourage you, pray for repentance, changed hearts. Some of them maybe need to come to Jesus. Know him. I'm not saving way. I'm not sure that God take care of that, but there's no evidence of the fruit of the Spirit, and no evidence of the Spirit of God in some of this. This is so far gone, and there's such corruption, wide corruption, and apathy from state executive directors. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is astounding. Let's wrap it up with this. Let me throw it over to Brian and Jim. You guys think for just a second, and then tell us what would you say? What do churches, what do individuals need to do to try to give support to Will and Sandy in this particular case? Do you think of some ways or things that churches could maybe come alongside them? He's already mentioned prayer, which is great, but what are some other things that maybe could be done? One of you guys, either one of you, jump in there.
I would just say talk about it. I think most of us don't really know what's going on. So talking about it with pastor friends, talking about it with folks who would care, who would matter to them. Because I think when you have knowledge leads to, hey, I want to pay attention. I want to know what's going on. That leads obviously to, we can pray. Pray for Will, pray for Sandy, certainly pray for Kevin, pray for the trustees, right? It isn't a one-sided thing, right? We're together, we're family. So be family, pray for the family. I think there's even a place for churches to consider, at some level, what they do with their cooperative mission dollars. I really hate thinking that, but I know it's a conversation we're having with our leadership, and I think many churches probably need to have that conversation.
Well, and just a point of fact, many state conventions now are setting it up where churches can or designate's not the right word, undesignate, I guess would be how you'd say it, but they can say, we don't want our cooperative gifts to go to this particular entity. So in some states, churches can do that for as many as 2 or 3 different entities that they're not comfortable supporting. There's been opposition to the ERLC and NAMB by churches. So people who are watching, they just need to check with their state convention from their church and say, hey, look, we just don't want to keep supporting NAMB right now. At that point, they could also redirect that portion that may be going to NAMB and redirect it towards supporting possibly Will and Sandy in the work they're doing. We'll put in the description a GoFundMe page that's been set up that can help support their legal costs. So that's a possibility. So I jumped back in there. But Jim, what are your thoughts about talking to other churches and people about what they may can do to support this couple as they continue this fight?
I think praying for them obviously is the number one, and checking on them, going on their Facebook page. Writing to the trustees, writing to Ronnie Floyd, saying, how are you going to intervene? We could also, look at supporting our state conventions more. If what I'm hearing is true, it sounds like a convention are being, starved, and therefore the local partnerships and our convention's being gutted right now. I've seen it shrink and shrink and shrink, and it really comes down to, NAMB's partnerships are broken with it. And we're a northern state, so we don't have a lot of resources, where our whole convention's smaller than some associations in the South, and
same with us in the Northwest.
Yeah. And so, our local people that have good, godly men and women that want to start churches, aren't going to pass the mustard with the new, centralized location. We know they would do an excellent job in our local area. So that's something to consider too. How do you better support local church planning and get you more hands on too? I believe this is kind of a challenge that
Right.
Will is given. I know Will would be glad to come out and speak. And you could help fund him that way too by having him come to a seminar and also share what's going on. I mean, that'd be a great thing and benefit both ways. His
Right.
passion, keep him busy and also get the word out.
Yeah. Well, speak for yourself. How are other ways possibly that we can give support to you and to Sandy and just this whole case that's moving forward now?
I think everything's been mentioned, Bobby. We certainly have seen God's hand. He's helped sustain us, and He's done it through the prayers of His people, the encouragement of His people. We're very much encouraged when whistleblowers come forward with new information like they did yesterday. Not so that we just have more trash on people, but the evidence gets to be so strong and overwhelming, but they really should be concerned about RICO charges, because there will be testimony that comes out that will show these planned efforts to do the damage that they did to you, Bobby. And I just represent you and many others that have had their lives turned upside down, fellow servants, faithful servants of Christ, because of this nonsense that's been allowed to be going on. So pray for us. We pray the words of encouragement. We pray that people would come forward and speak the truth. And I think Jim hit it right. I mean, I can come out, but also people can redirect resources locally, or if they want to take some of their CP money right now and help the people that are going to help the convention, that's probably helping me. It's just the way it is. I'm actually defending, I'm doing what the state convention should do, and what the executive committee should do.
Right.
Didn't Tennessee come out kind of and the exec kind of make a comment about this thing?
He did in the RLC matter, but there's not been a public one other than what Randy Adams has said regarding Kevin Easville's statement that state conventions are SBC entities, and nobody wants to upset. But listen, if our God is so small that he has to have us to cover up wrongs and cover up our institutions, we have a God, like J.B. Phillips said, that's way too small.
Yep.
We can't tolerate unrighteousness and ask God's favor. One of the scary things, guys, is that these men have lost a fear of God. And we act as though, we don't say it, but we act as though God doesn't get a vote. That somehow we've got to protect the cooperative program from doing what is right and just. Or we have to wait till our network gets in control of all the trustees. Then we'll do something, as if God is pleased with that. So I pray for guys just to be courageous right where you are. Local churches, I pastor a church, deal with local issues. Be faithful in that, be courageous, trust God in those things, and then pray for us and help us where you can, and God help us. We have a chance to actually really clean up our own act. The world does it, and they know we have problems. They want to know if we know we have problems, and when we know it, are we going to do anything about it? Or not. Right now, we haven't been doing much about it, and that's poor testimony to a lost and dying world.
Well, the reality is God does not need Southern Baptists. Southern Baptists need God. And if we don't line up and get back in line with where we should be, God can use somebody else to reach this country, to reach the outermost parts or the uttermost parts of the world. And you hate to look at it that way, but this lack of faithfulness, this corruption, the deception, all of those things, they're going to lead to the decline. And I'm with Brian. I think Brian is right on the money that this keeps moving the way it's moving. And leadership keeps doing what it's doing. Churches they're not only going to just start holding money, they're going to just leave. They're going to disassociate altogether.
Look, the GCR lets you totally transfer your funds anywhere and call yourself Southern Baptist anyway. So why would people not start doing that more? The less trust, the less cohesion, the less cooperation. The more churches that have funds will start doing their own thing all the time. And that's one thing I loved about the cooperative program, is that there was one fund, a unified budget. We all got behind it and we all pushed together. And we're all taking we're going to attack the gates of hell, free people from sin and bondage. And we may have a couple little different methodologies, but we're all on the same mission. And I don't sense that in clarity right now.
Yeah.
No, and we've got to get back to that.
Yes.
Yeah, no question. Will, thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's been kind of an extended conversation, and we've kind of pushed the limits of time, but thank you for joining us today. Let me just mention for him, Will, on his Facebook page, which we'll link to in our video description, but on his Facebook page, about usually once a week, sometimes a little bit more, he does a Facebook Live, usually with his wife, Sandy. Sometimes she'll do one alone, he'll do one alone, but usually at least once a week, and they've been giving updates on new information, things that are going on, that kind of thing. So if you'd like to support them and keep up with what's going on a regular basis, make sure and check that link below and go and look at his Facebook page and follow those video updates that he is doing on a regular basis as well. Will, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for being transparent, sharing your heart with us today, and thank you for basically defending who we are as Southern Baptists, even though it started to be more individual between you and Ezell and NAMB about what was happening directly. It's just grown, mushroomed to be much, much more. So thank you for that. Well, on behalf of our SBC Pastors Roundtable, I'm Bobby Gilstrap. We thank you for joining us today, and we hope you'll join us again in the future.